Okay guys, so in the other day we made the frames. We made 2 of these candy feeders. Just to sum it up, we did just some basic joinery on the corners to make it strong. Brad nailed it and glued it together. Put some hardware cloth in the bottom of it. I put it a little bit up from the bottom so when it sags from the sugar there's still plenty of room for the bees. I protected the edges from all the sharp stuff. On my table here I just have a garbage bag, so when I set this down on it it's not going to get all over my table. I have one of them made here. I just thought I'd show you the process for the other one. Basically it's going to be 20 pounds of sugar. Roughly 10 pounds of sugar is 4.8 kilograms, something around there. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. Basically, we're going to use 4 2 kilogram bags of sugar. For each bag of sugar, you basically need 3/4 of a cup of liquid. So we're going to put in, like I say, nothing here is like major accurate measuring. So I did, basically in this measuring cup I have enough for 2 bags of sugar, just because I don't have a big enough thing to stir anything in. So I'm going to put in, like, you know, just a tablespoon of vinegar. I put in a little bit of honey, some old honey that we have sitting around that we use for crafts and stuff like that. And that's more or less just for scent and flavor for the bees. And then we're also going to add some Honeybee Healthy, just like, you know, half a teaspoon or something like that. Again, this just the honeybee, you know, it promotes health in the bees, and, you know, the desire to eat, so to speak. So what we're going to do first is put down, just to help it keep in, we just have a piece of newspaper that we'll kind of put in first. Just keep it down in there, kind of rip it to size. I mean, the paper will get saturated from water or from moisture in there anyway, and break down pretty easy. It's kind of, newspaper gets used quite often in hives for things like when you're adding or combining 2 hives and stuff like that. They bust through the paper pretty easy. I also, in the front of the hive, or in the front of the box, I've drilled a hole. It's about 1/2 inch. And then in the newspaper, I like to rip a little hole out there, and on the back corners as well. And you'll see why in a few minutes here. Okay, so I've covered most of my board with newspaper, except for the few holes I've just ripped on purpose. Then what I do is I take a block of wood, just a scrap wood, and up at the front where the entrance is and where we ripped that little hole, we're going to put the block of wood there, just so we can form sugar around it. So I've got a bowl here. I'm going to dump in one of these bags. You know, you could do it all at once. Basically, it's really messy, and I don't have a really large bowl. It's not in storage somewhere. So with all the sugar in there, we just mix this, mix the liquid together. Like I say, there's enough in here for 2 bags, so we're just going to put half of this in here, so 3/4 of a cup, roughly. Give it a little mix first, and then we can make sure we got lots in there. It doesn't have to be wet. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that I see people doing this. It doesn't have to be completely saturated. Some people boil it. I like the idea, like I said, through the research that I've done, I like the idea of it being kind of a drier sugar candy, just because it'll also help absorb some of the moisture over the winter. Also, by doing it this way, if the bees don't eat it, don't need it over the winter, no big deal, because in the summer or in the spring we can reuse this mixture for their spring feeding. So it's not really going to waste at all, which is kind of nice. they call this, a lot of the beekeepers that have been doing this for a long time call this like bee insurance. If the bees need the food, they have it. You don't have to worry about it freezing like the syrups and stuff like that. If they don't need it, they don't need it. Basically, it's a couple of dollars for a bag of sugar. You know, so if you're using 4 of them in here, you're looking at $8. Considering a new colony of bees in the spring would cost, you know, a couple $100. This is pretty cheap insurance. So I'm gonna mix a couple of these up at once. So there's one. Do the same thing with another one. Oh, there's no clean way to do this. It's all over the floors. The dogs are kind of liking it. So basically we're just mixing it until all the sugar is damp. It's not super wet. You can see it's still crumbly. But once it's all wet, we'll dump the second one in. I'm going to do this in a few batches here to make it easier. Okay, so now holding the board in place, we're just kind of push this all up and around the corners here. Trying to fill in half of the mold, half of the frame. Kind of push it all in. Pack it down around this block. Okay, so now you can pull the block out, and basically it makes a hole around the entrance, or the exit, whatever you want to call it. And now we're going to do the same thing at the back, only on the sides, and that's for ventilation. So I'm going to mix 2 more bags of this stuff, and then I'll show you the end result. So just packing it in around the block. We'll move the block to the other side. And I'm also going to just push a little hole kind of in the center area here, because that's where the hole is on the inner cover of the hive. So I'll put that in there, and then once this all kind of dries, I'll just poke through the paper at the bottom. That'll allow some more moisture to come up. There we go. Remove the block. And there we go. So 2 of them are made up. Hey, Genoa. Where's that puppy dog? What's up, puppy dog? All right, so there we go. So there's there you can see the entrance to the hive, or into this box here. So that'll be their winter exit. It'll also, you know, allow some of the hot, moist air to leave the hive. You can see it's kind of packed in, you know, hand packed. There's a ventilation hole there and there, and then I kind of drill a hole in the center there for the hole in the bottom cover. So this is about 20 pounds of sugar in this one. It's about a little less, 15, basically 3 bags, 3 of these 2 kilogram bags in that one, and 4 of them in this one. That's the flow hive, so it's a little bit narrower than the regular hives. So I'll let these dry for a little bit, and then they should be good to go on the hive. So there's really not a lot to it, other than getting this mess cleaned up before my wife gets home. We'll get these on the hive and get them wrapped up for winter. But More about that next time. Till then, have a good one.